You guys, what's good? Welcome back. So it's part one for the basics of building muscle. We're gonna be talking about training to build some muscle today, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm yelling, but yo, let's get into it. Number one thing, exercise selection, right? So yo, go ham.
Alright, so the way you want to choose your exercises is based off your goal. Now, our goal is to build muscle.
Yeah.
And so we want to choose exercises that are specific to building the most amount of muscle possible.
Yeah.
Right? So these are compound movements: bench press, squats, deadlifts, rows, pull-ups, overhead press, and rows.
Yeah.
Right? So there are variations of these exercises that you can do,
Yeah.
but it's recommended that you stick to the basics first.
100%.
Learn how to do them properly first,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of go into the variations of those.
Yeah.
Right? Then you have your accessory movements that are basically just bodybuilding movements.
Like isolation movements.
Isolation
right?
movements.
Yeah.
And usually how I would tell you to pick those is based off your weak points. Right?
That the specificity
Yeah.
kind of plays, right?
So if, for example,
Yeah.
you are bench pressing and your lockout is weak, it's going to be a tricep problem. So you want to be specific
Yeah.
on choosing your resistance movements specific to your triceps being weak. So like tricep press downs, skull crushers,
Okay.
etc.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's one way, right? The other way would be like if you want to get big shoulders.
Alright, so you want big shoulders,
Yeah.
you obviously want to choose something like an overhead press, a seated dumbbell press.
Yeah.
You want to get strong on those movements, which is another topic. But
And then you would add accessories.
you would add accessories like lateral raises,
Yeah.
rear delt exercises, things like face pulls, rear delt
Okay.
flies,
Yeah.
as an assistance accessory
To the
to your main
main
movement.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the main thing is like that we talked about compound versus isolations, right?
Yeah.
So to get the most out of your exercise selections, choose the compound movements first, and then choose your accessory movements or the isolation movements based on the compound movements, either weaknesses or your own preferences. Like you want big shoulders, big arms. People always ask you, how do you get big arms? You just fucking do biceps more
Just
often.
do more biceps, more often, get stronger
Get
at them.
stronger. Yeah. So moving on from that, after that is the execution. So this is where the learning comes in. You know.
Now, as a beginner, there is a learning curve to being able to execute things properly.
Yeah.
Some things that may hinder you from executing an exercise properly is your mobility
Oh, shit.
and
Yeah.
strength,
Yeah.
right? So you combine those two. If you're getting better at your mobility and you're increasing your strength, for example, right? Somebody who struggles to keep upright at the bottom of a squat and their knees are caving in. Let's assume they have weak glutes,
Okay.
right? So when you're executing your squat, you want to focus on getting your glutes engaged,
Okay.
right? Some of that may come from you sitting all day having weak glutes, glute amnesia, as
Yeah,
they
yeah,
call
yeah.
it,
Yeah.
right? So
I don't
you
know.
want to be specific to the assistance exercises you choose for your glutes so that you can execute it properly, right? So it all kind of ties in to
Yeah.
that. Now it does take time for you to learn proper form, proper technique. Your
Yeah.
biomechanics are involved, and without getting too complicated over biomechanics,
Yeah.
it's basically the best way for you to move that weight from point A to point B safely and efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and like the importance, like he talked about, was like, yo, people always get, yo, my lower back is hurting. Yo, my this is hurting. That is hurting. Because they skip this phase altogether. They choose the exercises and they just try to get strong at it, right?
Yeah.
They don't take the time to learn the exercise. And I've gone through this myself where like I don't have a stable core or like I don't have strong glutes. So then I start getting lower back pains every time I squat and deadlift, right? So I'm actually relearning exercises right now, especially the deadlift and the squat. Just learning how to brace your core, learning how to activate your glutes, learning all these little things that go a long way, right? Because even that we mentioned in the first video, you mentioned was like the only way you're gonna build muscle is do some shit for consistent over time, right? So like, yo, don't skip this part. This is probably the most important part in the whole thing.
Yeah.
If you know how to do shit properly, you're gonna make some gains, right?
And something I want to add on to that is throughout your training career,
Yeah.
you may need to relearn some movements and relearn the execution of some movements based
100%.
on, when I was skinnier, I had a form that accommodated to my body, then I put on 50 pounds of muscle, you're not going to have the same form for your squat, bench, and deadlift.
100%.
They are going to change based off of your biomechanics as you get bigger, as you get smaller, you know, leaner or fatter, right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
that really does make a difference. So be aware that when you are progressing over the years, that things might tend to change in favor for how you need to do them, or rather you should change them in favor for how you need to do them.
Yeah, we'll cover that a little more in detail in the mindset section. We keep learning. Moving on from that, now it's the progressive overload. This is the area where like you should technically focus the most on to build the most muscle, right? So what are some things what is progressive overload, and what are some things we can do?
So to put it in layman's term, progressive overload is just getting better day by day by 3 basic principles. Number 1, frequency. Number 2, intensity. And number 3, volume. So what is frequency? Right? Frequency is the amount of times that you would perform that lift or train that group of muscles per week. Right? So if you're benching twice a week, you have twice a week frequency. If you're hitting chest twice a week, you have twice a week frequency.
Doing it more frequently.
Right? So you're being more frequent with it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Intensity, now this is where you can take definitions from different people. Different people have different definitions of it. It can be used either for the amount of load that you're using in accordance to your 1 rep max. So it can be used as a percentage, and it can also be used to define how hard you're training. Right? That's a totally separate video that Ronit will do on how hard you should train. But intensity is just like how much you're doing.
How much you're doing,
right?
For sure.
And then volume is actually also how much you're doing, but in terms of load, right? So are you doing, if you're doing 245 pounds for 10 reps, 245 times 10 is your volume. Right? And you want to progress on that volume a little bit by little bit each week, each month, each phase. Right? And your progressive overload should be covered in a in-depth program. The program should lay out the structure of your progressive overload. Let's say over 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever your length of your program may be, it will cover the aspect of progressive overload. That's basically why people have a program. Is to be able to progress, right? It's all written down for you. It's pre-planned, and it's determined before you actually do it.
Number 1 thing I would say, like I'm sure you maybe agree, progressive overload, number 1 thing would be strength. Right? Make sure you're progressing with your strength, right? Like you shouldn't be doing the same weights you were doing 6 months ago or a year ago, right? So if your strength is moving up, keep doing what you're doing. Don't try to like shock your body or whatever. Don't try to change too many variables. Strength should be number 1. Second thing probably could be just like adding more frequency, like you mentioned, right? Like example would be like a push-pull legs twice a week. So you're doing legs twice a week, you're pushing twice a week, you're doing pull twice a week, right? So actually like anything in life, progress over time. That's how you make gains, right? So I think that's a pretty good overall picture of building muscle in the sense of just training. So summarize it all, choose the big exercises that you get the most out of, like the compound movements, and then sprinkle on the accessory stuff based on your goals, right? Bodybuilding, or if you're trying to get strong, you're probably going to choose exercises to get your big lifts up.
Exactly.
Right? And then second thing is just like execution. It's probably the most important of all 3, maybe. It could be because foundations are usually the base, right? So learn everything properly, please. Hit Coach Qatar up, hit me up, whatever, to learn how to do these exercises. And then third thing is, make gains, right? So strength gains, frequency gains, volume gains, whatever way you want to progress, whatever works for you. That's pretty much it, right?
And to take the guesswork out of all of this, hire a coach. If you're starting off, hire a coach. Right? You're not gonna go through university without a professor. You're not gonna go through your entire training career and be successful without a knowledgeable coach.
100%. You'll just be more efficient, right? More effective. So that's it for the training for building muscle. Second thing we're gonna cover is nutrition. That'll be the video right after this. So that'll be part 2.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that. Okay. Stay making moves. Okay, but it's pretty good. How long is it?